He had not gotten out of sight of the strange shell cave, though, when a sudden gush of wind from the east started up. It began with an unusual accumulation of the disturbingly intelligent dust devils, twirling and carrying squirming creatures along its trail. Ken realized what was to come, ran as fast as he could in the giving desert dust, back towards the cave. It was a storm, a chaos storm, the likes of which shuns all thoughts of order, and the fleshly world carved from trees in the guise of Ask and Embala. This wind carried with it the dust of the desert, and what animals who were unlucky enough to be caught in it. While huddled in the cave, eyes closed against the dust, Ken allowed his thoughts to drift to the myth-ensconced origins of the desert's anger. Somewhere at its center, there lived the ever-rotting god. Whether it was hell or any of the familiar pantheon, he could not say, but it was said to be the remains of a god long since slain, who fell to earth because of its blasphemous death. A god should always die in battle, never in bed, as should men, in the last days of Ragnarok. Yet somewhere at the center it skulked, wanting death but never dying, its bony wings fanning the winds, impatiently waiting for the end, its falling flesh feeding the need for death that was the desert. It took hours for the dust to settle. He had to crawl into a crevice at the back of the cave to avoid suffocating at its mouth. The world he staggered out into was different than the one he had been in before. The shell was almost filled, and he was forced to crawl out on hands and knees in mock supplication to the erratic will of the desert. The old landmarks were lost and gone. A lone fanstone flicked feebly on its side near the cave mouth, but other than that one frail life, there was nothing. Like the gods, Hiken Olfarsson knew now when his time would come. The Vulva's prophecy had come true. Like the gods, Ragnarok would find him. The ship shaped from human nails would set forth, and the skies would be blotted out with poison. But he was just one man. The desert swallowed many men. Without hope he set out again until the cave was lost and he was lost. He doubted anyone should find him. He resolved to die so as to please his kinsmen, but after the fury of the storm there was nothing left to fight. There was only a graying flatness, the sameness and shameless wastes of uninhabitable inhuman land, and his footprints in the dust disappearing behind him. Time likewise disappeared without perspective. When it reappeared, Hakan was half delirious, and approaching what looked to be a narrow but deep creek creeping through the dirt. It could not have been an illusion, for no amount of spectral haze can fake the spindly shapes of the legged things and mites that crowded around it. He half slid, half fell down the narrow ditch to crouch low by the flowing water, sending all other life into a panic as he came. But something in his mind made him hesitate. This desert did not belong to men. He stuck one tentative finger in the water and wetted his lips. It tasted like the rotting fungus, and was thicker than water should ever be, but it did not seem like a sudden poison. That was all Hakan needed for his thirst to overcome reason, and he imbibed as great a portion of the rancid stuff as his hunger-bedeviled stomach could endure. When he had walked a short distance from the rancid creek, he thought he could see something moving ahead of him. He turned to look behind, and noticed that the scuttling and scraping creatures that had been slowly returning to their watering spot again scattered, burying themselves into the dust to disappear until the unspoken danger passed. It did not move right, not for an animal, not even the strange infestations that inhabited the desert. But Hakan's eyes were good as any human eyes could be in such a place, where infections and blindness were as likely as sight, and he had enough time to try and decipher the strange motions of the shifting thing. A fiend of dust and bone, whose flesh swam with the forms of strangers who screamed before shattering and returning to dust and bone. Hakan ran back to the fetid water's edge. It seemed to phase in and out like a despoiled and dirty tide, forming a twisting and debris-strewn spike. It never freed itself from the spike, but seemed to drag it like a rope as it advanced, floating up and down with uncanny speed. It would form a stranger's face during one of these cycles, then the face would crumble to show the bone beneath the thing, and it would all tumble into the dust, only to reappear again some distance nearer. It would do it again, and through these ghastly cycles of speed and decay it made its way quickly to Hakan. He hoped that the legend of the desert demons being unable to cross running water was true. It was not. Hakan Ovrasan prepared to face the thing in combat, having nothing more sure than his own stout form. He crouched low in a wrestling stance, but as this strangely tethered moving mass approached, his resolve broke with a snap of its ghoulish chain. The creature turned to dust and bone with an Easterner's scream. The next shift would bring the thing upon him. Hakan Ovrasan, warrior and merchant of the northern clans, ran. He could not wrestle the dust any more than Thor could best old age, or Loki out-eat fire. The thickness of his surroundings and his fright made him aware of how the shifting grey slipped beneath him, how its clouded edges in his way to choke and sully his breath. He ran, and in the panicked time sunk into the grey. The screams were keeping pace with him, each jump taking the devil just as close to him as it had been before. While Hakan was giving in to fatigue, the creature was relentless. Was it a minion of the ever-rotting god, mouldering in the desert until it found a trespasser who disturbed its master's futile attempts to gain the sleep of death? Was it a ghost, free from hell but never to gain Valhalla? Every time Hakan cast a fearful glance behind, he saw a different face shattering into powder, and the broken and dust-bound skeleton would scream, and it would be closer still. When he thought his flight could go on no longer, he realized that the grey had swallowed his vision. The sameness of it was blinding. Was it a dust storm? No, for he felt no wind. Before he could consider the alternatives, the grey broke open like a cosmic egg, pouring forth the yolk of reality. And before him he could see the runestones marking the entrance to his village. What stories and songs would they sing about the flight of Hakan Ovrasan, lost in the desert? What would have happened if no one was there to watch, to tell? The greatest wisdom of the Ibis god was that he sent out Hugin and Munin every day to see the affairs of Middle-earth. Odin One-Eye saw him running still, almost home. Odin One-Eye would attest to his triumph, for he had outrun death in the desert. Then in a horrible, frictionless backslide, the form of home drifted away from him. It was too late. Hakan Ovrasan was not himself anymore. Drift in, then out. Hakan's memory rebounded off the rocks near his ancestral home. Why could he go no further? Because he did not get any further. His consciousness was a dying echo, his victory less than even that. He resonated 12 more times before his life was spent. The facade crumbled. Hakan's face fell off of the brittle devil as it howled and broke its way into the haze of the grey horizon. It was unchanging, and as one with the desert.